Welcome to the Orthocast. Today our guest is Mason. He is an Orthodox convert. He is a musician, and a lot of his music has been featured in short films and also Charles Carroll's live streams, if you're familiar with him. And throughout this podcast, he's going to have a video looping of kind of his aesthetic. But Mason, for those who don't know you, what was your journey to Orthodoxy? What was your background?
So I was raised Catholic, and it was I did the whole kind of regular Catholic upbringing, but we weren't particularly religious, I guess, as far as we would go. Christmas, Easter usually, and then that was pretty much it. And then when I was kind of in my mid-teens, later teens, I was like I was basically kind of agnostic and very, I guess, materialistic in my worldview. And I kind of reached a terminal point of it where, there wasn't anything to go forward, and there were so many things that I just couldn't explain, and they couldn't fit into that worldview. So then I started kind of building from the ground up, like reassessing. I was reassessing religion, I guess, and I was no longer materialistic, but I still wasn't. I was kind of working from a Christian basis, but it wasn't always like that. So, and eventually, I remember seeing some stuff about Orthodoxy, some stuff online, some stuff in my personal life, and there was something about it that I was always kind of intrigued by it, because in Catholic school they didn't really talk about it that much. It was kind of mentioned, but nothing was really. I didn't even really understand like the union kind of issue.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even mention that at all. So
I honestly didn't even know Orthodox existed. I thought they were just like other Catholics, but
yeah.
So what was your first how did you become aware of Orthodoxy? You said online. Was it just like a random YouTube video, or
Yeah, there's just some stuff I saw, like websites that go on. I saw some stuff about it, and then I had a friend who I knew through music, who was like into Orthodoxy, and he was a big Jay Dyer fan, and this was like the end of 2018, and I remember him kind of sending me Jay Dyer videos back then, and I think he had converted around that period of time, so I remember he kind of pushed me, you gotta check it out, whatever. I was like, okay, so that I kind of made it my mission that I was going to go and check out one of these. I was pretty amenable to the ideas at that point. I think at that point I was pretty much Christian in my mentality, but it was like ill-refined, and I wanted to make it something more than what it was at that point. So eventually, like a couple months after that, I finally was able to. I got into an Orthodox church. It was a Greek church, and it was there's just something about the whole the liturgical experience that it felt like, okay, this is what I've been looking for, and this makes sense. So it was one of those you walk in and it makes sense.
Was there anything that kind of was like, wow, this is really different, especially since you were kind of like, there's so many like just kind of cultural Catholics where they're was there anything like, wow, this is a lot different? Like was there anything, setbacks or something that was hard to accept, or were you like, wow, this liturgy, I feel God here, this is exactly what I'm looking for, all this tradition. Was there any like stumbling blocks?
I'd say, and this was a stumbling block going into it, and I'd never gotten over it when I was Catholic, but I didn't like the idea of confession, like even around that point. And like Catholics, they didn't. Because Catholic confession is different, like than Orthodox confession. You go up to the front of the church and you kind of just stand there with the priest. Catholic confession, they have like the booth things you go into, or the priest is on one side and you just kind of walk in.
And it can be anonymous.
Yeah, exactly. You can do it where you sit next to the priest, but it was like culturally, at least in the Catholic circles I was in, it was you went into the booth thing. But I remember that I don't remember. I think I don't know. Definitely, I think that it was later on. I don't think it was at that church, but I remember hearing the whole kind of analogy of the the church, the priest is kind of like a spiritual doctor, and
Yes. Yeah.
you can't, if you've got like an infection, you don't just try and do it yourself. You gotta
Yeah.
you gotta like
Go to an
you gotta
expert.
find, yeah,
Yeah.
you go to an expert. And that was the argument that kind of clicked to me. I'm like, okay, well, that actually makes sense to me. It wasn't it was that, especially I think a lot of with Catholics, it is very like guilt based. I mean, there's that old saying about like the guilty Catholic conscience. But
Yeah.
like, even though I wasn't very practicing, I still had a lot of the Catholic mindset in a lot of things.
Hmm.
It's just, I'd say the big difference walking in, and I liked it, was that it was a lot more reverent, just
Hmm.
overall,
Yeah.
and symbolic. And I'm really, I mean, as being like a kind of an artist, I guess, in mentality, a lot of time it's like I'm very into symbolism and stuff like that. I found uh, that was somebody recommended it to me, but Jonathan Pajot's stuff,
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool because he's really into the whole symbolic stuff. And I mean, that was after I was already Orthodox, but that's like that was, I guess, a good way of thinking. Like, if I found his stuff earlier, I probably would have gotten onto this
Yeah.
stuff earlier.
He's really good.
Yeah,
But like you're really big into like tradition and returning to tradition. So
yeah.
did it was that kind of hard, like kind of embracing the East versus you're a Westerner, but like in a way it is like a return to tradition because the West used to be Orthodox.
Yeah.
So yeah, how has that been?
So I see it. I mean, I think there's two ways to look at it. You can look at it one direction. It's like going backwards, I guess, and
Yeah.
that's like one perspective I think that people look at it. But there's also, in my opinion, I think that what we see, if we look at the trace of the West through, especially like modernism, and then now where we are in kind of postmodernism, it's in some ways like the confrontation of postmodernism and the extreme nihilism is almost, it's like the only way out is through. Where in essence I think that orthodoxy and this mindset is like the what is it, the constancy and the uh, like some sort of bedrock is almost what
Yeah.
it's like. The West, it's the Western thought is tending towards that. And like that is almost like in essence, when you're faced with this, like this absolute nothingness of postmodernism, you realize that you need to have something that is like, you need like an absolute creator, you need God, and you need and you need this tradition in order to contain things. Like it's like you do something wrong and you realize like the full extent of the wrongness of your
Yeah.
trajectory, and that is almost what pushes you forward. So it's almost like the West's confrontation with postmodernism will lead to orthodoxy, not because it's like a total rejection of the West. It's almost like we've kind of gone like the long way around.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of how I
Well,
see
we've
it.
taken it to its like logical conclusion, kind of this,
Extreme, yeah,
yeah, this
yeah,
like enlightenment thinking, and it's like led, we can't go any further. We've hit
yeah.
the bedrock, so the only
It's
way,
it's
yeah,
we're at the point of absolute nothingness, where we, like in Nietzsche's words, where you're gazing at the abyss. And that's kind of like where we
yeah,
are. And it's like it's you can't build anything. Everything. If all truth just becomes totally relative, then there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing to be made of anything, because it's just whatever anybody wants it to be. Reality is totally subjective. And there's nothing. There's nothing more to be done. I mean, you might as well just lay over and die, is
yeah,
kind of what it
it
is. Which,
is,
unfortunately, some people, that's the mentality they
yeah.
take.
I think that is what happens, is like why we're seeing like a rise in suicide, because like our society
Yeah,
is committing like civilizational suicide because it's
yeah,
committed like philosophical suicide. Like
yeah,
there's nothing more to think about. There's nothing more to do. It's ran its course. But people are doubling down on postmodernism and all this, but it just
yeah,
isn't leading anywhere. But that
yeah,
kind of leads into the media and hyper reality, this like
yeah,
very simulated, the matrix reality that we live in. It's like
yeah.
it's really just like fake, and it's kind of like they've destroyed all truth and like metaphysics and everything, and now we just live in like a fake reality. So yeah.
Yeah, so there's a really good lecture. What's it called? Uh, Rick Roderick is the
Yeah.
lecturer,
Hmm.
but I remember coming across that a couple years ago, and I also, because I had a class in college that talked about some of this stuff, but they or what is it? Fatal Strategies. That's what the lecture
Oh
title
yeah,
is called.
I remember watching that.
And but Rick Roderick, he's talking about Jean Baudrillard, who kind of promulgated these like the simulacra and the hyper reality concepts.
Yeah.
And he basically he was saying that Baudrillard saw himself as like a post-apocalyptic thinker because like society in essence was already dead, and there wasn't anything left. It was all left into hyper reality, and that is kind of where we are, where everything, everybody's existence is simulated, and
Yeah.
like your interactions with people online are simulated. Even this conversation is simulated in a
Hmm.
sense that we're doing it over video
Yeah.
call. People, so it's and that was like why I kind of have thought about a lot of this in the music stuff too, because it's like I don't know, it's everything is kind of, the reality itself is dead right now, and that's like, so how to tie it into orthodoxy, that like orthodoxy is a real religion. It's in the sense that you can't engage with it in a hyper real sense. Like you have to,
Yeah.
like in essence, like some like the Protestant ideas of like the denying the real presence. It is almost like it is like, because now
Yeah.
like we don't have like it's in Baudrillard's terms, like Protestant, quote unquote communion is like it's simulacra, because it's a simulated version of Christ. It's a representation. It's not
Yeah.
it's not
It's
it's
not
not
real.
actually the real
Yeah.
thing. But for us, everything is real. The and in your engage, like, and people like to talk about like aesthetics, but it's like, but what is an aesthetic? An aesthetic experience, aesthetic experiences when you're engaging all of your senses.
Yeah.
And that is what the Orthodox liturgy is a genuine aesthetic experience, because you have incense going around, so
Hmm.
you're engaging smell. Um, you can
You're seeing
yeah,
these beautiful icons all
yeah,
around the church. You're hearing your priest sing, and you should be
yeah,
singing too. So it
yeah.
literally uses everything. And
Yeah, and when you go up to receive communion, then you
yeah.
taste the body and blood of Christ. So there's no, I mean, and the more and if you're kind of saturating yourself in a holy way, then it becomes harder for like the devil to work through other senses and stuff like that. So the more physically, like especially like working through a prayer rope through the service or something like that's like a very tactile engagement with it.
Yeah.
But it is like it is a very real. It's not, there's no simulacra. It's all real, and
Yeah.
I think that's what people need, because people are, that the problem of hyperreality becomes that people the hyperreality is more for in most cases it's more enticing than the real thing.
Yeah.
Like people talk about it, like when you see actual blood versus like blood in a movie, it's not like red and bright like it is in the movies. It's a lot darker, and then obviously like movies, like one of the main senses that movies lack is smell. Like when you have these images of the battlefield or whatever, like it doesn't smell like crap or whatever. It's all, that's all obfuscated, but
Yeah.
people want to live, and that's the where things are going, like with the transhumanist stuff, is it's a lot of people would be fine with it, because and that's like the sad part, because their reality is so dead and hyper reality is so much more present to them, that they would all voluntarily just like you know uh, like plug themselves into
Yeah.
some sort of computer, or at
Why
least
not? I
die
mean,
trying. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's what's left for them
Yeah.
to do. So
Upload their conscious to an AI.
everything, well, and
Yeah.
everything that they
Try.
engage with is in like the digital realm. It's not, there's nothing
Yeah.
real. I mean, so what's the point of being in reality? It's this dead corpse for some people that they're dragging along,
Yeah. That's what's helped me so much about orthodoxy is I feel like it's so grounded in reality, and I used to focus so much on just like fantasy and like, this simulated reality, because growing up, me and you're on like video games. That's like a
Yeah.
simulated reality of like basically what your ancestors would do in like real life, like
Yep.
the real thing. Or like
Yep.
something like fast food, again, that's like, it's like simulated calories, like it's not giving you like
Yeah.
real, it's everything is just like a cheap alternative or like a hologram of what you
Yep.
actually should be getting. Or something like, pornography, that's
Yep.
another simulated thing, and it will never actually bring you
Well, and
that
that
satisfaction.
and that's like that's where the OnlyFans stuff is like I say that's like the most pernicious out of all the it's like it's almost the most evolved form of pornography because it
Yeah.
combines in essence what it's combined was like the kind of the e-girl stuff that you were seeing on like Twitch and stuff like that with like actual pornography. Now like the e-girl and the pornography are the same thing,
Yeah.
but it provides that simulated because everybody, people are so lonely now, especially young men,
Mm-hmm.
and the OnlyFans, it provides a simulated like simulated girlfriend
Yeah.
almost, or a
Literally.
simulated feeling,
Yeah.
at least in the modern or postmodern sense of like what a girlfriend is supposed to be, which is inherently in our age sexual.
Yeah.
And So people get that, but and it really messes with your mind because I mean, a lot of these guys like they think that this is like their girlfriend,
Yeah.
and it totally like it, it it makes you almost incapable of like I think this is like if you want to call it mind rot, like that's really what we're engaging with it with probably around my age, a little older maybe, and younger for sure. But like there's this degree where I don't know with some people I'm not sure like the amount of rehabilitation that's necessary is astronomical. Like I know there's really good channel Orthodox Talks. Father
Yeah.
Cosmas, he's a monk out in Australia, but he talks a lot about this kind of stuff where it's like a lot of kids, they're just, the way that we've been raised, it's kind of, we're in essence forever scarred by the way we've been raised. And,
Yeah.
like this is something that, I mean, I'm just glad that I didn't, I didn't get a smartphone until I was 16 or something like that. So I still remember most of my life before that kind of stuff. But I mean, some of these people, they have a smartphone since they were like 5 or 6, their first memories, like in essence, the smartphone has always existed for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's that kind of person, I can't even imagine what their reality is like
Yeah.
because that's all they've ever known.
It's just simulated. And it's like
Mhm.
sad because it is like the hologram, and it doesn't actually bring them what they need. Like you have like these simulated friends, simulated now
Mhm.
girlfriend, but it's not the same as like having a real in person. And like
Yeah.
I feel like, you would think like with social media everyone there would be no loneliness. But I feel
Mhm.
like people are even getting even more lonely. Like you can look at a lot of statistics, like even in the
Yeah.
1990s, people used to just have more friends. And
Yeah.
like when you get rid of, I mean, there's lots of reasons for this. Like I think one of this is, people stop going to church.
Yeah.
And because of the kind of society we live in where it's very, suburban,
Mhm.
where you are physically isolated from your neighbors. I mean, if you think of like how America builds its cities versus like, Europe or more traditional societies where it's more walkable, you can actually go and see your neighbors,
Yeah.
versus in America, you are actually like, you are physically separated from your neighbors. It's not, most people, you live in a very car dependent area. So if you get rid of something like the church, a community center, then now all that people do is drive to and from work, and they just come home and they watch the propaganda all
Yeah.
day. And then it just
Well,
makes them angrier and angrier.
and think of it like this too, that they've in essence they've excised out the community and every part of the community that people had in their lives they've replaced with like the television and it's obviously also the internet.
Yeah.
But that's and you hear like people don't because it's again they're people we still don't under a lot of people they don't understand the television what it's doing like in a sense of they haven't internalized what it's doing and what you're living with these people like they are projections of people, they're hyper real versions
Yeah.
of like these TV hosts or whatever, but they are like they become real to people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting where you have people that I think it's more the older generation that's really addicted to television, but like they get like very irked, like like if you insult their whoever's on the television, they feel like they react as if you've insulted their friend because their brain understands them as such. And that's kind of like, as far as the limitations of our biology, or whatever you want to call it, like we aren't able to really make a difference between watching some TV host on the television, somebody that we know in real life, and that becomes a problem because now you can't really discern between the hyper real and the real, and it's
Yeah.
and that's part of the problem. Like, and what you were saying earlier with the with people, like when they're on, like, how people are so miserable. It's like, because when you're let's say you're on Instagram or you're on Facebook or whatever, generally speaking, the only part of people's lives that you're seeing are the best parts of their lives. So you look at it and you're like, oh, somebody got a new car, somebody got this job promotion, somebody got this, somebody got that, and oh, look at mine. I just, I had my car broke down this day, the other day, and my I have to do this big repair on my house. But you never see any of that on, people don't expose their real selves because there's no point to, it's like inauthenticity is kind of the name of the game these days.
Yeah. I think one of the best things for me is realizing that, like, all of us, I think if you ask people, they know this. Everyone knows that they know that there's like a hyper reality, and that you see like a glossed over picture of people's lives, yet people still can massively consume all this media. That's why I think one of the best things for me is just, I finally deleted Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and all these. And, now I just have YouTube. And what we always talk about so much is really focusing on real life, like focusing on the people around you. Luke Smith, who we both like, talks about this all the time, is like, really, like, don't be highly online. That's not the key to happiness. The key to happiness is finding, real good people around you.
Yeah, no, you need to you need to, like, just get offline. I don't really know what else to say. Like, I mean, if you don't have a community, then you have to create one. Because I think a lot of people, they think that, like, you create a community, like, I start something, and then all of a sudden, like, a bunch of people show up to it, and they're just gonna, like, you have to make something of value, and then you have to be a person of value. Like, if you're not somebody that's valuable, I mean, it's like kind of harsh, but it's like there's a lot of people that they don't really have anything to offer. It's like, so what do you do? It's like, they're in bad shape, their hygiene is poor, they're like, just their personalities are abrasive. Like, and then they wonder why people don't want to be around them. It's like, well, sorry, but it's like, because nobody wants to be around you. So like, you need to, like, get yourself to a position where you're, like, working on likability is really essential.
And that's the thing, is like, before the internet, if you like had antisocial behaviors, it wouldn't be encouraged by the people around you. Like, you would have to be basically assimilated, and you'd have to become an attractive, like,
that's why
you'd have to assimilate to the society. Versus now, you can just find some online niche and feel like your fetish, like whatever weird thing you're into, is normal, and they validate every unhealthy behavior.
And I think that's why cities have accelerated, and it'll continue to accelerate as far as kind of the degeneration of them, because they attract in these, like, fringe people and they know that, whether maybe it's like, I don't know, whatever weird fetish people are into these days, but, like, they go to the cities because they know that those people are there, and then when they're there, it's like they they kind of encourage each other, and then it gets worse because there's no. That's why it's like, people kind of joke about it, like, people need to be bullied more or something like that. But I mean, like, there is a healthy sense of bullying where, people would, like, certain antisocial behaviors were curtailed because people were they were kind of
certain
bullied
behaviors
out.
just aren't tolerated. You look at a society like South Korea or Japan. I mean, people they just have standards. They have social standards. You don't go around dressed like a prostitute, like half naked. They have standards in their society. There's social etiquette. They don't even need to enforce it by the law because it's just so ingrained in the culture. And it becomes a
Yeah.
lot more pleasant place to live when people aren't just throwing trash everywhere and doing drugs, and they actually
Yeah.
care just because that's the culture. And so
You know,
culture is so important.
it's funny that you said about people dressing like prostitutes. One guy told me a funny Dave Chappelle joke, but people they get mad. It's like, oh, well, why are you, stop calling me this or that or treating me like this. And the Dave Chappelle joke was like, you're what is it? You might not be doing the job, but you're wearing the uniform.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's
just
a lot of people. It's like, oh, they're wearing the uniform,
yeah.
and I mean, it's like it's like the old joke where it's like, you can put on high visibility vest and go around and people will like act like you're important.
Yeah.
It's kind of
But
like, well, you're wearing the
yeah.
uniform, so people will treat you like that.
But it's just weird how inverted our society's morality is. Like literally, it's not the person's problem for doing an antisocial behavior. It's you're the problem. You're the bigot for judging them. Like
Yeah.
that's the worst thing ever. You have to tolerate every behavior, and the worst sin is just to judge or just to like have standards. Like that's
Yeah, well,
it's
and
just
that's like people always like to turn the old, oh, well, judge lest ye be judged, and that kind of.
yeah,
It's like, but like you're not supposed to judge individuals and place yourself on a
yeah,
standard higher than them. Like, oh, this person does this sin, so that makes me better than. Like that's what you're
yeah.
not supposed to do. But you have to discern. You do have to make judgments about things as a whole, and certain. I mean, and to a degree, you have to make judgments about people in the sense of like, do I want to associate with this person or not? Like, if they're doing something that's, and the kind of the whole point of like, what was it, the gospel with it's like, if you judge somebody for a speck of dust
Oh
in
yeah,
their eye when you have a log in your own.
yeah,
But what's Christ say after that? He says, well, work on getting the log out of your eye so that you can help other people. Like,
exactly.
so I mean, it's not like, people act like you can't say anything negative like that. And, it's typical that people that aren't Christian that
I know
are
it's so
are
annoying.
quoting this
They're
back
like
to you.
they're like, well, you're not even a real Christian. Jesus said not to judge, and it's like
Yeah.
you don't go to church, you
Yeah.
blaspheme Christ, and then
Yeah.
you think you know it. You don't even understand. The
Yeah.
point of that is everyone should hold each other to a high standard.
Yeah.
If we just, but what they want to do is just lower the standard, just have no standards for anyone. But that's how you get everyone to go to hell. Versus like
Yeah.
if you have I want my friends to have a high standard for me, and I have a high
Yeah.
standard for them. So you lift each other up. Versus
Yeah.
now it's just like, oh, we all have low standards, so who
Yeah.
cares?
And everybody's, and it kind of goes back to this hyper individualism that exists
Yes,
within, especially the American. It's in the Western mentality, but it's particularly the American
American.
mentality.
Yeah,
And it's I don't want you to tell me what you can't tell me what I should do and all that. And
yeah,
obviously you don't want to, you don't want things to be so collectivistic that you totally erase any sense of
yeah,
individuality. But you do need collective standards and collective identities and these kinds of things to give yourself to give yourself a standard and a meaning and to like glue things together. Otherwise, things. I mean, that's why we have like standards and like programming languages or real languages, like we call that grammar.
yeah,
Because then we know that there's a way in which we can derive, like there's rules, so we know we can derive some kind of absolute meaning from it. But everything is just whatever standard you want it to be as an individual, then it's just there's nothing, you can't really figure out what. I mean, language itself is just totally
yeah.
irrelevant.
But that was a
So
big shift for me because I feel like a lot of us, you're kind of raised on that super individualism, and a lot of
yeah.
right leaning people, they initially become libertarians because that's
Mm,
kind of what they were like raised. But then you start to see that there is value in the collective. Obviously,
yeah.
not the extreme, like I'd say China is too
Mm,
collective, where there isn't really any emphasis on the individual. But we're on the other extreme where it's just so focused on the individual, whatever the individual wants, that it comes at the detriment of the society. So
yeah.
you need a balance of both, where every individual has some unique value, but you need a collective identity. And I think the best way to have that is, something like orthodoxy. Like if you think of all these Orthodox nations, it is so ingrained in their national identity. Like in Serbia, to be like a Serb means to be Orthodox. Like it is so ingrained, and that transcends their individuality. So
Yeah.
having the individual and the collective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's we live under the tyranny of the individual in America, and that's why partly why everything's kind of falling apart because it's just whatever, if you have some weird standard, then that gets, and the weird thing is that gets enforced on everybody else, and it's, I don't know, it's very unhealthy, and
Yeah.
it's like you look at like how litigious this country is, and like how there's a lawsuit for everything. I mean, I remember like my college, like there were, we couldn't have, they didn't have like some of the barbells in like one of the area, one like in just one of the open gym areas because, oh well, you could get hurt doing that, and it's, I
Yeah.
don't know,
You lose out on a lot of nice things when people
yeah,
just want to sue for everything or they're too individualistic. But one
yeah,
other thing I wanted to add about, the power of like, going to your local church and doing stuff in person is that it may be initially harder to get those. It's harder to get people to do stuff in person. But once
hmm
you get those people, you get a real loyalty, a
yeah,
real friendship. So
yeah,
everything in society now is just geared towards instant gratification and
yeah,
instantly get it versus like the things that are really worth it, they take a lot of time. And
yeah,
so like, like having those in-person people is going
mm,
to be so much more valuable. Like having like, like 2 or 3 really good in-person, people you can meet with versus having like 100 people online.
yeah,
Those in-person people are gonna they will be there for you, and
yeah.
even though the initial investment is a lot harder.
Yeah, and then that's like the way out of this situation is you need to build those real communities so you can lean on each other and help each other out. That's ultimately
Yeah.
what this is all about. Because you can't, and that's like the acceptance that you can't, these problems that we see today. You can't face them as an individual. You need to have the community behind you so that you can all help each other to survive, and yeah, it is, it's and I think people get obsessed with numbers, like they need, I've got X
Yeah.
amount of people or whatever. Like, I always said it with my music, I'd rather have like a small cult following than like like mass popularity,
Yeah.
because those like small cult followers, those are the people that will like go to the ends of the earth to like support you.
I
But
mean,
you're
yeah.
like, if you're just like lukewarmly popular with anybody, then there's nobody that's there. Like when obviously this isn't music, but like it goes with people too. Where if you have just a bunch of lukewarm people, like when you're really in dire straits, and like a lot of people, like those people that are lukewarm, they're going to betray you.
Yeah.
They will turn on you, or they'll just find excuses to not
Yeah.
help you.
Well,
So
and then throughout history, it's always been a small minority can transform
yeah,
society. You just need like, I mean, even like just you don't need 90% of the population. You
yeah,
just need the people like
you
if
need
you yeah, absolute
small
loyalty.
zealous group of people. Like look at the 12 apostles. I mean, it was
Yeah.
12 guys,
Yeah.
and they
Change the world.
yeah, they changed the
Yeah.
world forever.
I recently did a stream with Chase Haggard where we really focused on why people need to make music, secular music, but from Orthodox people and like get in the culture and create good art. So Mason, can you talk a little bit about like your music, and then it's also been featured, so maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, as far as the music, there's, it's weird, like how you do music and what, like it's hard to understand how you make creative things in general, because it's like you just get ideas that pop in your head.
Yeah.
I think a lot of how I understand it is a lot of it is driven by the circumstance of what's going on around you, and all that. So what's cool about is the first album I ever put out was almost 7 years ago exactly, and that was like it was a very like rudimentary album, but it's weird. Like I go back and I listen to it, and it's like I all of a sudden, like all the memories and the smells and the sights and all that kind of stuff around when I wrote that, they all like kind of come rushing back to you.
Yeah.
And like the album that kind of like took off, and that was like, it was like the album where that was where stuff started getting featured on Charles's stream.
Mm-hmm.
But was the Checked In album, and that was like, it's an album, like if you look through my discography, it's like, why do I keep on coming back to this particular album? Because I put a remaster out this year. There was like a remix in the end of 2018 that I put out. Why do I keep on coming back to the idea? And like, it kind of goes back into the name, and like, it was like a pivot point in my life, because there were a lot of bad things that were happening prior to that kind of happening, and things actually for once were getting a little bit better. And it was, in a lot of these album titles, they end up being like jokes or play on words, but not like cheesy, I guess, but at least I hope that they're not. But like, there's the whole saying of like being checked out, like, yeah man, just do LSD, smoke pot, and check out, like.
Yeah.
And that's what for a lot of my life, I was kind of checked out, not in the drug sense, but just in a mental sense. But it's like actually checking into your life and being like present.
Yeah.
I don't know how that was, and what you had to endure through that was like a very pivotal moment for me.
No, same with me. Like, just having like a internal locus of control, like being present in the moment versus like so much stuff. You just check out, like with anime, video games, 4chan, whatever it is. You just kind of check out, and drugs, whatever. Everyone has their vice, and you just kind of sedate yourself. But so that kind of like, that's the reason you made the album. But what's kind of your music like, or what would you describe your style and how it's changed since becoming Orthodox?
So a lot of it, I mean, I started off like, I mean, I had no idea. I remember I like booted up my DAW when I got it, and I really didn't, like, when I published checked in, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I didn't really care. I mean, I just wanted to publish stuff, because I there's a lot of people that, I don't know, like, I've never been one. I don't really hang out, and like, there's a couple of people that I have listened to their advice, like within the music world, but they were people I already kind of knew, and I already valued their input. But I was never like the kind of person where I would go on like Reddit or whatever, like those communities where people like post, oh, rate my, I feel like that's a way that gets where you're gonna end up like, and you see it a lot with, I remember like, you hear some of like the music YouTubers' music, and it all sounds the same.
Yeah.
And it drives me insane, because everything, the thought process becomes like homogenized and centralized, and then it's no longer like, and then that's a kind of the balance of like,
it's just catering to what's kind of popular at the time.
Exactly.
Versus you were kind of creating music because
that I liked. Yeah. That I liked, and the stuff that expressed. I've always been trying to express like bizarre aesthetics, or things that are somewhat contradictory. Like, so that was like, there's a lot of like the song titles like reflect that. So like one of the songs on Checked In, that was like vague introspection. So it's like trying like, what is like, it's interesting to like take these terms like that are kind of complicated to think about, but then try to express that aesthetic in music form. And that's like music. I like, if you like go to my website and all that, you'll see this like little saying. It's called like the integration of communication, and that is like the heart of what I am trying to do. It is because you can look at communication. Obviously, we're communicating verbally right now, but that is just one means of communicating. Music, and it's a very linear means of communication. When we talk like written or verbal, you have one step, and then you have the next step, and the next step. Music, it obviously has linear elements, because you have starts, songs, you have like the chorus or whatever, and then you have like an ending. But also there's different parts that it's a little bit more nonlinear than a lot of music, or than a lot of other forms of communication.
Especially when you have a music video too, I feel like it communicates so much. Like,
exactly.
Music,
because that's where you can get that aesthetic experience, because now you've got like you've got like the suggestion, like and then like that, like, so this video that's been going the whole time, that's on my YouTube channel, but that is like, it's called The Windmill is the song, and that was like, it's like this ominous, foreboding kind of theme to it, and that's like that's what this image, like, it's like just this windmill that just keeps on going and going and going, and it never seems to end, but a lot of it. So like, as far as the stylistic goes with the music, it was like, it started off, obviously it's like you write to what your limitations are, and sometimes I'm at a point now where I have to kind of artificially impose limitations, because you suffer from, you have so many things that you can do, and that you become paralyzed So I ended up having to set limitations. But I started out like it was these like the Checked In album is these basic arrangements. It was like a guitar that was not even my guitar. It's like an electronic guitar that was built into the software. I was using that, and then the same with like a bass guitar. It was built in that, some like programmed drums, and then some like synthesizers that are like built into the software too. And that was kind of where it started. And then I ended up getting more into like understanding like sound design and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that was so then the Convenient Truth album, which again that title was like kind of a play on words on like Al Gore's and Inconvenient Truth the title. But it's more, that album was about like there's actually a lot of meaning in that album, and it's like about transhumanism. And that was written, it's funny because the transhumanism stuff is taken off more in discussion these days, but that was written in the middle of early middle 2018.
Wow.
And that was kind of when I was starting to come in contact with a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And it was like that was like there's a 3-part song called like Brain Implanted Cell Phone. And
Wow.
and a lot of it was like about like, you know, this like transhumanist mind control stuff. And
it's a prophetic album.
yeah, the album has aged super well.
That's good.
And I really like that album. But it was like that one's much more synthesizer focused.
And what are your favorite songs? Like your favorite songs that you have
Oh.
done? And I'll have a clip of a little bit of them. Yeah, if you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, which one's
So
your favorite?
let me look at my discography right now, because it's like the funny thing. So this is like a funny thing that happens with a lot of artists and stuff, is that you like, I have songs I really love that nobody listens to.
Yeah.
And then the songs I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's all right, you know, I publish that.
Yeah.
Or I write it in like literally like I'll write it in 10 minutes or something, and then people love it, and I'm like, you know, it's all right. There's very few songs that I really like that other people really like. So I mean, if there's the song that from a composition standpoint that I am the most proud of is a song called Instructive Disillusionment, which is on the Year of Endless Spring album.
Yeah.
And it's like 16 minutes, and it was like the hardest song to write and to mix and engineer, because there's like, it was one of those songs I actually had to wait. I had to get better at mixing to be able to finish it, because there was too much. It's like very it's a very dense arrangement. Like there's a billion different like Rhodes pianos going on, and like the Rhodes piano, I love the sound of the Rhodes piano. That's like probably the most prominent instrument in a lot of like, and you might not recognize, because it's not always like a kind of standard sounding Rhodes, but I use like a digital Rhodes piano for making a lot of the different things. And that whole album, Year of Endless Spring, has a bunch of Rhodes pianos in it. But this thing, it had like 4 to 6 Rhodes pianos going on at the same time. And it's hard to mix because it tends to be a pretty muddy instrument. And so you don't want to like kill the low end and the low mids, because then you lose the body. But if you leave too much of it, then it ends up being like too muddy and just garbly. But I love that song. That's probably like, as far as a compositional, like what am I most proud of? I love that one because also because it was the struggle of it too.
Yeah.
It took like so many like there were at least 2 or 3 albums that I tried to put it on. Like I tried to put it on to the Convenient Truth. I tried to put it on to this Pre-Manufactured Delusions album. I tried to put it on to Refutation, Degradation, Sublimation. And then I finally was able to put it on to Year of Endless Spring. So that's probably one I'm most proud of. As far as like, I mean, I put out a new album recently, and I really it's called Unaltered States, which again, kind of it's like, you know, a lot of people are in altered states, so it's like, what are unaltered states, you know?
Yeah.
I'm trying to subvert the subversion, I guess is what I'm trying to do. But
that's what Chase said too. He's like trying to, you know, a good subversion in music. But yeah. With your
well, if everything's upside down, then
yeah.
you have to subvert it, you know, like subversion is undoing it in a lot of ways. But on that album, I really like Hall of Abandonment. Now that song seems to be not performing. The song on that album that people, which I do like this song a lot too, but the song that people like seem to like a lot on that album is Screensaver 2001. I also, the other song I do really like off of that album, and it's kind of tied, I'd say my favorite ones on that album are either Hall of Abandonment or Leipzig Dream Sequence. And those are two like very kind of, they're the aesthetic, a lot of that I'm going for, like genre, if you want to do that, is like atmospheric electronic. Those are both very atmospheric. Like they're things I get. Like these are things that, and it worked out. Like to talk about, to tie into the short film. So
Yeah.
I got approached in August of this year by a guy who had heard my music. I think initially through Charles's stream, and he's a filmmaker, and he has his own, like, it's his own like passion project kind of thing. And he asked me, like, he had already cut the film, so he sent me like, this is what it would look like, would you be fine with me using it? And I was like, it was really, I mean, it was one of those things, because I wasn't sure really what to expect. Like I never had somebody approach me for, or actually I did have one person
And
before.
the short film is really well made, and the music.
Oh yeah,
like,
I mean,
I was surprised. It was really good.
When I watched it first, I'm like, holy crap, this is amazing. Like this guy is like a real professional, And he was a really big fan of my music, and I was like, cool. I remember I had a conversation with him, and we really had similar views on art and stuff like that. So it was like a perfect match. But
what would you say to like young artists of like, how did you get your music on Charles Carroll's live stream in the first place, and this led to other opportunities?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you get that initial music out
I mean,
there?
it's kind of like, so the one thing I would say is that it's like, it's just a lot of, at the base of it, it's a lot of hard work, and it's and it's like, you just need to like cultivate. I mean, like, one thing I would just say is like, don't fall into those traps of like find somebody that is a good mentor, but don't like just go on forums and like listen to, because I mean,
don't be too desperate.
The reality is there's a lot of people that don't have good advice, and and I was lucky enough. So I mean, how I got the music on the stream was just kind of lucky and random, I guess. Like, Charles had a Discord at that time, and I just there was like a self-promotion thing, and that's the other thing. I mean, you just kind of have to shamelessly self-promote yourself, like, and just be. And I almost did not post it in there, because I was like, oh, I don't, whatever, but I ended up posting in there, and then like, I think it was like within a couple of hours or something, Charles, oh, can I use this on stream? Now, the advantage that, part of why that started too was because of like all the copyright stuff. Because I own the stuff and I had control over it, I was able to kind of like remove a lot of the things that made it painful to have background music on. He wanted to have background music, and then it also just kind of like worked out aesthetically, like that they meshed well. So, and that was a really good thing. It was stressful, because at that time I only had like 3 albums that were published, and the second album I really was not happy with. The first album was just very basic, and then I had the Checked In album, which I really liked, but I was like, felt an enormous pressure to like write a lot of music, because I'm like, crap, like, people are gonna get sick of this music, playing the same music playing, and they're gonna hate me. So I needed to like, so I ended up like just writing a ton. Like, I mean, I was easily putting in probably 40 or 50 hours a week for a good solid year and a half. Like, wow. on doing and getting better at music, because that was the pressure that I felt, and that was good. And I said that there are 2 people that I can, and there was a whole kind of, we had at one point, there was like a Discord that I was in that was just some people from kind of the Charles's stream that did music, that were good, that knew what they were good art people, we'll say that. And one of the guys was James Price, who he did some of the early songs on like the $1 Million Extreme videos, and he still does some stuff with. I've seen him credited with Sad World. Noah Monk, who is Gibby and iCarly, he does. So Sad World is like his is Noah Monk's like side project or whatever. But I saw James had done some, and he's like super knowledgeable. Helped me a lot with mixing. I remember he would always like tell me my mixes were too muddy. And I remember I would just like I had that in my mind, and that like helped me unmuddy my mixes, you
Yeah.
know?
So like find a good mentor,
Yeah.
being a good spears, and if you consistently work hard, there'll always be
It
opportunities, and you like
yeah.
shoot your shot. But it's all about
Yeah.
just kind of being in the right place, and then
Yeah.
if you're consistent, then eventually it will work out.
Hopefully. Yeah. I mean, I really don't know if I can say eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't say like, I've been doing this as a side hobby basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's the better way to do it.
Yeah.
Like just being, I'm gonna be a SoundCloud rapper and like not having a job is it doesn't
Yeah.
really work in my opinion. Although it's hard because, you know, doing a regular job is very draining
Oh,
creatively.
yeah.
And I definitely have. It was easier to write in college than it was because I'd get breaks than it
Yeah.
was now that I work full
Yeah.
time. So
But I think everyone should have some sort of side hobby or side hustle, even if it's just something that they genuinely
yeah,
enjoy doing. It can be a
yeah.
side income, or worst case, you just enjoy doing it, so you get
Yeah, exactly.
satisfaction.
And
Yeah,
doing music as far as like just as something that as a side hobby, it's very liberating and meaningful
yeah,
because you're putting something out there. Like if you think about it like this way, you get really good at a video game. Like there's nothing of really record that
yeah,
you were really good at a video game. But like this stuff, like this will last beyond my lifetime.
yeah.
There will always be a record and it's something I can at the very least a memory that can be preserved in my family and stuff like that that people will always be able to
Exactly.
remember me by. And I like I said you freeze a version of yourself and when you make
Yeah,
something artistic it's sometimes you don't always like that self. I mean I look back at like my prior
yeah,
self and even a year ago and it's like geez I was really an idiot
yeah.
and I it's it's hard, but that's like, but I mean, that is the beauty in that we are given,
I think
we can
that
repent and we can
yeah.
be granted
I
forgiveness,
think that's such an important point on video games. Is like stop playing video games and instead invest your skills and time into a
Yeah.
hobby that you can actually look back on. Like I
Yeah.
literally have probably like 10,000 plus hours in video games. I have
Yeah.
nothing to show for it. Versus
Yeah.
like, if you start making music, you can see your improvement too in your
Yeah.
in your music. You can say, "Oh, this is my music I made years ago."
Yeah.
It will last you a lifetime. Or like YouTube videos. Like I have
Yeah.
YouTube videos and now I can look at my YouTube channel and be like, "Oh, this is what I was doing a year ago." Versus
Yeah.
you have nothing to show for video games. But
Yeah.
I think this is
And
a good place to end it. Do you have any last final thoughts about orthodoxy or music or anything?
yeah, I mean, I don't know, just if you like, I know it's not always easy as far as where, but find a church that you can go to in person as,
Yes.
and start, like I said, be somebody that's likable that people want to be around. And then also like, if you're not Orthodox, like, take your time and you'll know when it's the right time.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a while to fully, you know, like convert over.
Yeah. And
It wasn't
we're still in the process of converting. It's like a
exactly.
lifelong process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I would say just
Take your
uh,
time.
take your time, but find that community. And if there isn't one, then you need to find a way to build one.
Yeah.
Don't just people. We need to be men of action, and
Yes.
and we can't be passive. It's essential that we aren't just passive and just watching things, but and hold yourself to to God's standard. I was going to say
Yeah.
the highest standard, but that's God's standard. Hold yourself to God's standard, and like
Yeah.
things will work out like in the way that, and it's not always going to be good things that things work out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of bad things that will happen to you that seem bad in the moment, but you like that is where it's most important to have
Mhm.
like faith in God and in
Yeah.
God's plan for your life. Because it's it. I mean, if I look back like where I was, at the beginning of college or whatever, when I was like very agnostic or whatever, and like where I am now, um, I mean, I would not believe like if I went back to
Yeah.
myself right now and told where I would be now, I would have no I would totally blow myself off. And
Yeah.
but I mean things happen in your life, and I mean you will go through immense suffering, but that there is so much value in it, in suffering, and that is how you will grow as a person. So I
There's
mean
so
that
much things that have happened to me that I'm like, why is this bad thing happening to me?
yeah
But then like a year later, I'm like, wow, that was like so important in my development. It's
yeah
literally it's character development. So
exactly yeah and
when you think like have an orthodox mindset and you have faith in God, then I think it's very easy to just always be a very optimistic because ultimately it's gonna work out for you. Maybe you
yeah
suffer in this life, but you have eternal life, and
yeah
the saints all died with a smile on their face. So it's like we have
yeah
nothing to complain about, and just
yeah
be optimistic and yeah,
just keep on chugging. I mean,
yeah,
that's it. Like, just keep
yeah,
on going forward, and like,
yeah,
be an example to other people. And
yeah,
that's like the only thing you can really, that's what you have control over. That's, and focus on things that you can control. And as far as like, you can control yourself and your actions and all that kind of stuff. And there's some people also, you can't control them, but you can influence them,
yeah,
people around you, and focus on that. The big things, those are where you get depressed, where you're
yeah.
like sitting watching like national news all the time
Oh
and think, oh, this
gosh,
bad thing happened, this bad
yeah,
thing happened. I mean, there's a lot of bad things happening right now in the world, but my life is awesome. I'm
yeah,
like very
exactly.
grateful for it.
Well, it's like
And
yeah, it's like
that's something I can control.
all throughout history, there has always been bad things happening, and that
Yeah,
right now you could say there's less bad things happening. The only difference is like now we are aware of all the bad things
yeah,
happening and all the fear. So, but if you just don't watch the news, ignorance is bliss. You don't know what's like it doesn't affect you. No,
yeah,
knowing what's going on, it really doesn't. Like just focus on like there's no point in getting like mad about it or
yep,
like letting it suck your energy because that's energy that
yep,
could be used for prayer or just something productive, learning a
yep,
skill. But yeah, thanks, Mason.
yep.
I will probably have you again on in the future. Maybe we could,
Sounds good.
yeah, maybe we could talk about some Orthodox books that are good. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some a lot more topics I'd like to cover. But thanks. God bless.
Yep.